Dave Sparks. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Infrastructure Authority, and welcome back to Jackson on another beautiful day here in the mountains. I get to the honor here of introducing Treasurer Mark Gordon. Treasurer Gordon will be starting things off this morning. We'll touch on Wyoming's investment strategy and opportunities for investing in energy technologies. Treasurer Gordon's principal duty is to safeguard and invest all funds in the state. Treasurer Gordon was elected in 2014, but served for 2 years prior to that, leading the term of Joe Meyer, who passed, unfortunately, while in office. Wyoming's treasurer serves as administrator for several programs, including the Wyoming State Treasurer's Asset Reserve, which is a full investment vehicle for local governments. The treasurer serves on 8 other boards and commissions, including the State Loan and Investment Board and Wyoming Retirement System. Previously, Treasurer Gordon served as a Class B director on the board of the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, a trustee of the Wyoming Wildlife and National Resources Trust, a member and chair of the Environmental Quality Council, a trustee of Johnson County School District 1, and other community boards. Thank you for your service across the state. Nationally, he was elected in 2013 as Western Regional Vice President and has served on the banking and pension subcommittees of the National Association of State Treasurers. Treasurer Gordon continues to receive accolades and was named in the top 100 most significant and impactful asset owners and public executives. Treasurer Gordon is a graduate of Middlebury College. Please welcome Treasurer Gordon.
Good morning. It's wonderful to be here and having the opportunity to get out to Cheyenne and drive up through yesterday, and actually the blessing of having the Wyoming Highway Department stop you for probably pretty close to 30 minutes in one of the most beautiful spots you could imagine in Bondurant. I wasn't irritated at all. Anyway, I have some prepared slides that I hope will be useful. I had a whole prepared conversation. I have my iPad here, and I'm not going to throw it over my shoulder. I want you to know that my conversations this morning gave me sort of pause about what I had prepared. So I'm going to kind of talk to you a little bit about exactly what we're up to, what we've done over the last couple of years, and then kind of walk into some of the top thoughts that I had prepared for you. Wyoming has a remarkable history. Our background is all minerals, and we have really built a tremendous economy on that. Along about 1974, we made some changes. And I was thinking about that because when I was a kid, we used to ride out from our barn. It was about a 7-mile ride. We left at 2 o'clock in the morning. We got all the way out to wherever the cows were, and my dad would then say, wait here until the light shows up, and then take whatever you see and go that direction. Now, we get in a horse trailer, we drive out there, the cows are much easier to move, we're all a lot quieter with the cattle, and the whole process works a lot better. So Wyoming has had that experience with mineral development, learned a lot from it, and one of the things we learned is how important it is to make investments for the future. So today, the portfolio, all told, stands at right around $21 billion. That makes us the 3rd largest sovereign domestic fund, behind Alaska and behind New Mexico. The Texas Teachers Fund is in there too, but they're not truly a sovereign fund. What that produces for the people of Wyoming is the 2nd largest revenue stream. It means that every Wyoming citizen gets the benefit of about $1,500 to $1,800 in taxes saved. So it's a remarkable gift that this portfolio gives. The problem is that people look at $21 billion and they say, well, why can't we invest that in our state? Why can't we make better use of it? And part of that is the reason that these funds are set up in permanent funds and non-permanent funds. The funds that the legislature can actually appropriate are only about a third of that. The rest of them are permanent funds. And we'll walk through that in just a little bit. But the most important thing that we think about is how do we make Wyoming's future work? So I want to just put it up here. If I can get it to work. Anyway. Sarah, could you just advance, please? So this chart is from J.P. Morgan. We just had a conference, and I apologize about this, sir. But what you see here is what our severance taxes, our total tax picture is. And you can see there's quite a lot of volatility. So minerals account for the largest value to Wyoming. I think for every $3,000 in property taxes that we put in, we get about $30,000 in benefits back. This is the portfolio as it sits today, and you will see that there's a tremendous amount of volatility in that income stream. Us, like all other commodity-rich states, are going through the same issues. Alaska has a $4 billion budget deficit. They have taken their $18 billion rainy day fund down to $1 billion, and they're trying to diversify their income. Can you move forward a second? So, thank you, Sarah. This was work that was done by a Jackson resident, Joel Rubel, at the Treasurer's Conference last week. And what this does is it charts the amount of contribution from the various tax streams that we have and puts them in what's called a Sharpe ratio, which is the dependability, more or less the dependability of that income stream over time. This is what our pension, this is what our permanent funds yield for us. If you look at pooled income and the permanent mineral trust fund income, far to the left, they're relatively small. That's the dependable income. What the Sharpe ratio is telling us is that we can count on that year over year to be dependably part of our budget. As you move further out, you'll see that minerals is the big bubble out there. And that's the most volatile stream that we have. So Wyoming needs to somehow figure out how to move from something that is going to be run entirely by its volatile income streams to something that's much more dependable over time. Part of that is what we do with our investments. So let me turn a little bit to just energy. This work came from a Federal Reserve conference in in Oklahoma City 2 weeks ago, and it's kind of looking out over the horizon. What we see is a mix of fuels as they grow, and we see what the demand curves are. The most exciting thing that we see about energy today, in my opinion, is the fact that we have far too much energy. There are so many different sources. There are so many opportunities to develop energy that we really can afford to have tremendous opinions about it, and we can have very, very strong opinions about it. But you can see that oil is coming down somewhat, coal is coming down somewhat, gas is going up. Renewables have made a remarkable improvement on this. The energy mix is going to happen. The point I want to make here, coal isn't going away, nor is oil. What we do see is that overall demand over time has, and I'm sure you all know this, but overall energy demand has been increasing, but our use of energy has been much more efficient, so the net effect has been a lowering of our energy consumption over time. Go ahead. So, in the large discussion that we have in the country at this point, it's about, well, renewables, we need to get out of fossil fuels. Renewables are going to take a bigger and larger chunk of that. It's all the rush. We have an incredibly critical juncture that we have to really aggressively go about. This is the last administration that's really pushing this. This chart is going to show you a couple of things. First off, it takes a long time for portfolios to change. You'll see from coal and oil and natural gas their growth. You see where we are on renewables. The point of this slide is to say that we have time to be intelligent about how we start to move our energy. That's one piece of it. Please go ahead. Second piece of it, and this is just to show some of the investment that's gone into renewables and what their effect has been. This is also JP Morgan's slide. Please go ahead. So this chart, I think, is particularly interesting when we think about sort of the future of the economy and how we're going to work. So the point is that renewables are most beneficial on the electric side of things. So if we put this in residential, commercial, transport, industrial, and electricity, we see, and I'm not minimizing renewables, but we do see that the contribution renewables can make is not broadly across the economy. There are pieces it can make a big difference in. The conversion is going to take some time, but we have sectors here that are not going to be affected by renewables. So when you look at that and the time it's going to take to convert, we realize that we have to invest in things like the Integrated Test Center and other things to begin to use our fossil fuels much more intelligently. And it's really exciting to see that we're in a state, Wyoming, that has taken a leadership role in how we begin to develop those technologies. But that's not to say that there aren't some opportunities there. This is an animation, we'll walk through it. This is an animation that's a sort of hypothetical of West Texas done by a friend of mine, Emery Lovins, from the Rocky Mountain Institute, talking about how you can lower, what we're seeing here is the fluctuations in energy demand in West Texas over the time, and we'll see how you could layer in different technologies to come to a fully renewable, and this is hypothetical, but a fully renewable portfolio to meet energy demand without the intermittency that we often see. So just walk slowly through it. This is wind contribution, West Texas. This is solar coming in on it too. This is the geothermal contributions. The biomass, as you can see, the gray line above is the old demand. The line below is what efficiency improvements do. This is biomass generation, better HVAC and ice storage battery technologies, storage and recovery battery technology again, and finally demand response, because that's the grid, a smart grid demand response. And you can see, this is projected for 2050, but you can see that it is possible conceptually to come to a completely renewable portfolio on electrical generation in West Texas. And I guess it's still power too. So let's talk a little bit about some of the other things that are happening in the transportation sector. The transportation sector is really fascinating because there's a lot of talk about autonomous vehicles and a lot of talk about electric vehicles. So I'm going to talk a little bit about electric vehicles, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about digital autonomous electric vehicles and what their contributions are going to be. This again came from the Federal Reserve 2 weeks ago, and today we have the demand on the far left is 1 million barrels per day, 19 million barrels per day. Excuse me, yes. And then what is going to account when you have the kind of demand that you're going to see in energy and transportation over time? You actually only see it move from 19 to 23 by 2035 because you have gains in fuel efficiency, that's 17%, switching to natural gas vehicles, 0.2, and switching to electric vehicles, 1.2. Now what's interesting when we talk about electric vehicles, they will make a huge contribution in terms of passenger cars. But in terms of trucks, the weight that's associated with them is going to make that a little bit more difficult to convert. So the transportation sector still is going to have to rely a lot on fossil fuels over time. But what happens to oil demand? And this is, I guess, the point I'm making here is that we have a really fascinating future. We see, as we go over time here, these are the various sectors that are going to be represented in oil. We see demand is sort of peaking in for road transport in about 2027 or so. but the demand continues to rise because of chemistry, because of industrial usage and buildings and power. So the point is that our energy future is still very robust, and we have an exciting opportunity. Has there ever been more of a time when we've had more types of energy, more ways to use that energy, more ways to transport that energy? And so what I'm going to ask you to do now, and I guess the thing that's interesting as I go around nationally, and talk to various groups, there's a lot of different attitudes about what our energy supply should look like. I think what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that we have to be open to new ideas, and we have to think about how we can invest in those ideas to make them go forward. So I'm going to try a little experiment here because I want to wake you up. It's a little bit of Tai Chi in the morning. I'm going to ask you to fold your arms. Okay, is this a comfortable place to be? Is this the way you like to deal with, let's say regulators that show up or lawyers that come like this? Feels good, right? So this is the attitude that most of us come. If I'm in the West Coast, in Washington, this is, we have got to get ratepayers to figure out how to decommission coal scrap because carbon is a huge problem for the future, and we're going to let our ratepayers pay for the decommission. Ratepayers didn't have anything to do with that, but this is the attitude we have. If we're in Wyoming, it's renewables have no future. We don't like renewables. We don't want them to be around. We need to promote fossil fuels. This is the attitude we have. Now I'm going to ask you to change the way you fold your arms. Feels a little different, doesn't it? Yeah, because some people are
How do I do that?
But the point of this exercise is really that as we go forward and we look at investments, and I'm coming back to what Wyoming does, as we look at investments and as we go forward, we need to think about it from both this side and from this side, because we don't know. All these projections are most likely wrong. I could run a chart up there that would show you what everybody's prediction on energy demand has been for the last 20 years. They have all been wrong. But what has been true is that energy demand has probably declined faster than anybody anticipated. But the mix has changed over time as new technologies come into play. So how does Wyoming's portfolio enter into this? And I'll finish with this. So Wyoming is a broadly based portfolio that invests in traditional assets across the board. I see in the back one of my colleagues, Tom, is back there. Pension fund does much the same thing. But as we look at that portfolio, how can we begin to help move both Wyoming and the country and I guess the world forward into a new exciting energy future? Wyoming does not have the capacity to invest in venture capital. By the Constitution, I am required to make sure that I have a good return on the investments, and I can't take risks with those. So the couple of things that we have tried to do over the last couple of years have been, number one, to differentiate our funds so that we can take certain funds and be able to put them to use for economic development, risk-free economic development. So then how do we, risk is the biggest issue, how do we begin to mitigate for risk and help people innovate and go forward? We can do that with legislative appropriations, and we can do that by forming a seed fund that can partner with other banks and other investors to be able to help hit the very important and very large kinds of projects that are going to come. If you look at the biggest constraints we have on energy coming out of Wyoming, all of it is infrastructure. It has to do with how do we get transmission lines to work, how do we get pipelines in place, how do we get our energy, what we have, out to the world to consume. So we're working very hard to make sure that we have strong presence at a number of national conferences and among investors to try to promote them. And we've done a very good job of trying to make sure that we're fair as we approach these things, because technology does not advance only on the most fashionable sectors. Pension funds nationally at this point, and I think the next panel is talking about this, talk a lot about moving the needle. It's about trying to force a certain type of energy to be more prevalent for good reasons, maybe, but nonetheless, there are efforts that go from let's invest in good stuff to let's not invest in what we consider to be bad things. And the problem with that, as I've looked at it, is that, for example, fossil fuels. My colleague in Massachusetts has made a statement that none of the pension funds of the state of Massachusetts are going to be put in fossil fuels. They have completely curtailed all of their investment, and yet, when you look at what's happening, not only that investment idea, but when you look at what's happening in Japan, per se, Japan has the most efficient fleet with emissions that are almost exactly what natural gas coal generation is. So this is coal-fired capacity that has the same emission profile as natural gas. We can move forward on all of these fronts. So, there's an abundance. Efficiency will continue to play a major role in meeting the bulk of the displaced fossil fuels. Technological advance is not limited to renewables. It's not even limited to supply or transportation. It's not even limited to how we use it. Coal, oil, and gas will become increasingly valuable for chemistry. There's a need for infrastructure of all types, and there's a need for institutional investing as well as private investing to make that happen. And Wyoming has a very, very bright future. We have wind markets, we just learned this the other day, that are to the west. We have fossil fuel markets that are to the east. We have opportunities to transport our coal off the west coast and possibly down through Mexico. It is an exciting time for Wyoming. And Wyoming truly has led the way in a lot of these issues that the country is dealing with at this point. And so keeping an eye on the ball is very, very important. And the last one I have is just to say that our future is very bright if we remember to have an open mind and look at the signs. So, with that, thank you.